Selling more guns in the last 3 weeks than we did in the last 8 months.
It's a semi-automatic, just like that's a semi-automatic. The rifle's not available for purchase, don't have a selector switch for 3-round bursts or fully auto.
Something that doesn't fit into these 10-point criteria that Congress just put out.
Close to 50,000 background checks over 46 years. Why would I willfully ignore this background check?
Court has the right to temporarily remove a firearm where there's danger to themselves or others.
And within less than 15 minutes, you can walk out the front door here with a rifle or a shotgun.
We're banning a class of weapons that you don't like the look of just because you don't like the way that they look, because they function exactly the same. Now move this one over one.
But for me, and for most of you, here's what it really is. It's an important first step.
An incident stemming from the purchase of a 100-round LCM ended in the demise of tons of innocent people, and their families are not willing to see this happen again. The Supreme Court is getting involved in the case, which could potentially have irreversible effects on the Second Amendment, or at the very least change its landscape. Let's find out what's going on in this case. The tragic shooting. On August 4, 2019, a devastating shooting took place in the Oregon district of Dayton, Ohio, leaving 9 innocent people deceased and dozens injured. The shooter responsible for this tragic event was identified as Connor Betts, a 24-year-old man. The incident sent shockwaves through the community and sparked conversations about gun violence, mental health, and public safety. The shooting unfolded in a bustling nightlife area where people were enjoying their evening. Suddenly, chaos erupted as Betts opened fire with a .223 caliber high-capacity rifle. In less than a minute, he indiscriminately targeted innocent bystanders, creating a scene of terror and devastation. Law enforcement authorities swiftly responded to the scene, engaging the shooter and bringing the rampage to an end. Betts was shot and slain by officers, preventing further harm. The quick and decisive actions of law enforcement helped to mitigate the loss of life and brought some sense of closure to a traumatized community. In the aftermath of the shooting, investigators delved into Betts's background and motives, hoping to uncover insights into what led to this horrific act. It was revealed that Betts had a history of expressing violent thoughts and an obsession with violence. During his high school years, he had even created a hit list of individuals he wished to harm. However, the exact motives behind the Ohio shooting remain unclear, leaving the community grappling with questions and seeking ways to prevent similar incidents in the future.
Blocks away from where tragedy struck earlier this morning, hundreds prayed, sang, and cried together during a vigil for the victims.
I won't be afraid. Amazing grace.
For a long time, and it's just awful. All of this is awful. It happens so much.
It's a horrible tragedy for our community.
Is to say to them that we love.
I was one of them. I'm deeply sad, but I'm angry.
There's no weapon more strong than the weapon of forgiveness.
The shooting in Dayton reignited a nationwide conversation about gun control laws and the need for enhanced measures to prevent gun violence. Advocates for stricter regulations pointed to this tragedy as evidence of the urgency to address loopholes and implement comprehensive background checks. The use of a high-capacity rifle in the shooting highlighted concerns about the accessibility and lethality of such firearms. Mental health also emerged as a critical aspect of the discussion. The incident prompted calls for improved access to mental health resources, early intervention, and effective support systems for individuals who may pose a risk to themselves or others. The shooting raised questions about identifying and addressing warning signs of potential violence in order to prevent future tragedies. The Ohio shooting by Connor Betts further underscored the importance of community resilience and support in the face of such horrific events. The people of Dayton rallied together, mourning the lives lost and offering support to the survivors and their families. Vigils, fundraisers, and community gatherings served as a reminder of the strength and solidarity of the community during times of adversity.
They have not yet established a motive, but they do believe that the gunman acted alone.
Some are saying absolutely not. He was not intentional. Some say no, it had to be. I would say it's inconclusive.
On whether he intentionally targeted her.
Observed a large crowd running away from this gunfire. The officers immediately advanced toward the gunfire, and within approximately 20 seconds.
I think that should be enough thematically that you should get a pretty clear picture of what was going on here.
KCI lawsuit. In 2021, the anti-gun Brady organization funded a Nevada lawsuit against the Korean company Kyung Chang Industry Company Limited and KCI USA over the company's mags. The lawsuit came after the mass slaying in Dayton, Ohio, when the far leftist slayer took the lives of 9 people and injured 17 others before being slain by police. The shooter used a KCI mag and an AR-style pistol. Since the mag held more than 10 rounds, the families claim it made the shooter deadlier, and KCI USA was negligent for selling the mags. The lawsuit starts by quoting Bill Ruger's infamous statement that no honest man needs more than 10 rounds, and that he never intended for simple civilians to have his 20 or 30 round mags. Bill Ruger retired from the company he helped found in 2000. Since that time, Sturm, Ruger & Company have continued to produce AR-15s and market 30-round mags to the public, splitting from the ideas of Bill Ruger. The company currently supports the right of all Americans to own mags of any size. The complaint doesn't mention the company's current stance on mags. The lawsuit filed in Clark County District Court in Nevada was asking for damages as well as an injunction for the defendant Kyung Chang Industry to stop selling the 100-round LCM. At that time, CLLs and emails to KCI were not returned. To our knowledge, this is the first lawsuit that focused solely on the marketing and manufacture and sale of high-capacity mags, Jonathan Lowy, an attorney representing the family, said. Lowy, the chief counsel and vice president of legal at the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, acknowledged there have been numerous lawsuits against the makers and sellers of guns, and manufacturers of body armor, ammunition, and LCMs have been included in broader lawsuits. But, he said, we're not aware of any that have been focused solely on the mag. Lowy said the lawsuit is not about stopping all mags under a certain capacity, but about the manufacturer's decision to make 100-round mags to market them to the general public, to do so without any reasonable restrictions or conditions, to allow and even to encourage in some ways that people use internet sellers to obtain those 100-round mags, to not screen for who would be an appropriate user of 100-round mags. In 1994, Congress passed a law banning these weapons and large-capacity mags, but the law expired in 2004. As of 2019, 9 states banned such large-capacity mags, but Ohio was not one of them. The lawsuit alleges that the defendant's LCM enabled the shooter to transform the popular commercial district into a war zone in seconds. It goes on to say that as a result of the massive capacity of the mag and the corresponding lack of a need to pause and reload, the shooter was able to discharge 41 rounds in approximately 32 seconds before being slain by responding police officers. KCI deemed the lawsuit frivolous since the individual involved obtained the mag through a second party rather than directly from the company. The person responsible for the crime did not purchase or obtain the mag from the company themselves. Instead, they received it from someone else who had purchased it. The individual who provided the mag to the shooter has now been convicted of unlawfully possessing a firearm and making false statements regarding the firearm. The victim's family filed a lawsuit against KCI, claiming that the company was negligent in manufacturing the mags used in the shooting. In response, KCI sought to have the lawsuit dismissed by arguing that the mag is a component part of a firearm. They believe that since it falls under this category, they should be entitled to complete immunity and protections provided by the PLCAA. The case was initially brought before the 8th Judicial District Court in Clark County, Nevada. However, upon review, the court determined that KCI's mag did not qualify as a component part of a firearm eligible for immunity under the PLCAA. As a result, the court denied KCI's motion to dismiss the case. In response, KCI proceeded to file a writ of mandamus with the Nevada Supreme Court, alleging that the lower court had made an error in denying their motion to dismiss. KCI argued that in their perspective, a firearm mag is indeed a component part of a firearm and should be afforded PLCAA protections. However, even after reviewing the case, the Nevada Supreme Court rejected KCI's petition. Consequently, KCI has now submitted a petition to the Supreme Court, urging them to take up the case and examine whether mags are eligible for protections under the PLCAA. They are requesting the Supreme Court's review on this matter of mags and their potential inclusion under the PLCAA. But what exactly is the PLCAA? The PLCAA Act, the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, is a significant piece of legislation in the U.S. that was signed into law in 2005, and it has the utmost importance in this case. The primary purpose of the PLCAA is to provide immunity and legal protection to firearm manufacturers, distributors, dealers, and trade associations from civil lawsuits related to the misuse of firearms by individuals. The PLCAA shields the firearms industry from being held liable for damages resulting from the criminal or unlawful misuse of their products. It is designed to prevent frivolous lawsuits that seek to hold the industry accountable for the actions of third parties who misuse firearms. This legal protection ensures that firearm manufacturers and sellers can continue to operate without the constant threat of bankruptcy or legal battles. The implications of the PLCAA are significant. By offering immunity from civil lawsuits, the law fosters an environment of stability and certainty within the firearms industry. This allows companies to focus on manufacturing and providing lawful firearms to responsible individuals while contributing to the national economy. The PLCAA also promotes consistency in the legal treatment of the firearms industry across different states, preventing variations in liability laws that could potentially hinder interstate commerce. The PLCAA's importance lies in preserving the balance between individual rights and legal responsibility. It recognizes that the primary responsibility for criminal acts lies with the individuals who commit them, rather than the manufacturers or sellers of firearms. It upholds the principles of the Second Amendment, protecting the rights of law-abiding citizens to purchase and possess firearms for self-defense, sport shooting, and other lawful purposes. However, the PLCAA has not been without controversy. Some people argue that it provides blanket immunity to the firearms industry, even in cases where negligence or wrongful conduct by manufacturers or sellers can be demonstrated. They believe that this immunity shields the industry from accountability and hampers efforts to promote stricter gun control measures. Opponents of the PLCAA argue that manufacturers and sellers should be held responsible if they knowingly contribute to the illegal supply of firearms or fail to exercise reasonable care in preventing their weapons from falling into the wrong hands, which is what the lawsuit against KSI alleges too. Other controversial cases have emerged, where plaintiffs have challenged the constitutionality of the PLCAA. Some argue that the law violates the principles of equal protection under the law or infringes upon the rights of victims seeking justice. Additionally, questions have been raised regarding the extent of immunity provided by the PLCAA and whether it applies to all aspects of the firearms industry, including manufacturing defects or negligent marketing practices. This is not the first such case to pass, but such cases usually are not successful. In 2014, the families of victims of the tragic Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting filed a lawsuit against Remington Arms, the manufacturer of the firearm used in the attack. The lawsuit alleged that Remington marketed the AR-15 style rifle used in the shooting in a manner that appealed to individuals prone to violence. The case argued that Remington should be held accountable for the shooting under Connecticut's consumer protection laws. However, the Connecticut Supreme Court dismissed the lawsuit in 2019, citing the PLCAA's immunity provisions. Going even further back in 2009, 2 Milwaukee police officers were shot and injured by a teenager using a firearm purchased by someone else. The injured officers filed a lawsuit against the gun shop, Badger Guns, arguing that the store should be held accountable for negligence in the sale of the firearm. The case claimed that the store knowingly sold the firearm to a straw purchaser who intended to provide it to someone prohibited from owning firearms. However, the lawsuit was dismissed by the court based on the PLCAA's protections. Pro-gun activists' reactions. Pro-gun activists vehemently oppose this notion that firearm companies can be held liable for third-party conduct, such as mass shootings. First and foremost, pro-gun activists assert that holding firearm companies responsible for the actions of individuals misusing their products would set a dangerous precedent for other industries. They are arguing that this selective imposition of liability unfairly targets firearms manufacturers while ignoring the fact that responsibility lies primarily with the individuals who commit heinous acts. Holding companies accountable for the criminal actions of others could have a chilling effect on innovation, business growth, and overall economic development. Placing liability on firearm companies would divert attention from addressing the root causes of gun violence. People are emphasizing the importance of focusing on mental health issues, social factors, and the effective enforcement of existing laws to prevent tragedies rather than targeting manufacturers who lawfully produce and distribute firearms. They argue that efforts should be directed towards improving access to mental health services, early intervention programs, and community support networks to address the underlying issues leading to acts of violence. Another significant concern among pro-gun activists is the potential impact on lawful gun owners. Holding firearm companies liable for third-party actions could lead to increased costs, restrictions, and limitations on access to firearms. They fear that this could erode the rights of responsible gun owners and hinder their ability to exercise their Second Amendment rights. By holding manufacturers accountable for the actions of criminals, the burden of responsibility would be unfairly shifted onto law-abiding citizens. Pro-gun activists also emphasize the importance of personal responsibility and accountability. They argue that individuals should be held responsible for their own actions, rather than placing blame on the companies that produce firearms. They contend that the focus should be on enforcing existing laws and punishing those who commit crimes, rather than imposing additional burdens on manufacturers who already adhere to strict regulatory guidelines. Pro-gun activists argue that holding firearm companies liable would have little practical impact on preventing tragedies. They point out that criminals who are willing to commit acts of violence are unlikely to be deterred by the threat of legal action against manufacturers. Instead, they advocate for comprehensive solutions that address the root causes of violence, such as improving security measures, promoting responsible gun ownership, and fostering a culture of respect for firearms. Oversight and protocol. In its essence, the lawsuit alleges that KCI USA has no meaningful protocols, checks, or oversight in place to ensure that its product isn't used in a mass shooting. Even gun activists fully agree that ensuring that firearm manufacturing companies have meaningful protocols and oversight is of utmost importance. The implementation of rigorous protocols and oversight is essential for ensuring safety. Firearms are inherently dangerous if not handled or manufactured properly. By establishing comprehensive safety protocols, companies can minimize the risk of accidents, malfunctions, and other safety hazards associated with firearms. This includes adherence to strict manufacturing standards, quality control procedures, and testing protocols to verify the reliability and functionality of each firearm produced. Such measures help protect not only the end users, but also the manufacturers themselves from liability and reputational damage. Meaningful protocols and oversight are vital for maintaining product quality. Firearm manufacturing companies must strive to produce firearms that meet high standards of quality and performance. By establishing robust protocols throughout the manufacturing process, companies can ensure that every firearm produced adheres to the required specifications. This includes meticulous inspections, testing, and quality assurance procedures to identify and rectify any defects or issues before the products reach the market. Consistently delivering high-quality firearms fosters trust among consumers, law enforcement agencies, and the general public, who rely on these products for self-defense, sporting activities, and professional use. In addition to safety and product quality, meaningful protocols and oversight help companies comply with legal and regulatory requirements. The firearm industry is subject to various laws, regulations, and licensing requirements aimed at ensuring public safety and preventing the misuse of firearms. By implementing robust oversight measures, companies can demonstrate their commitment to adhering to these regulations. This includes obtaining the necessary permits and licenses, accurately documenting transactions, and conducting background checks to prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands. By maintaining legal compliance, firearm manufacturing companies contribute to the overall integrity of the industry and help prevent unauthorized access to firearms. In the U.S., there are several laws and regulations in place to ensure that firearms are manufactured and distributed safely by firearms manufacturing companies. For example, the GCA is a federal law that regulates the firearms industry and sets standards for the manufacturing, importation, and distribution of firearms. It requires firearm manufacturers and dealers to be licensed by the ATF and establishes certain criteria for obtaining and maintaining a license. Enacted in 1993, the Brady Act establishes background check requirements for firearm purchases from licensed dealers. It mandates that licensed dealers conduct a background check through the National Instant Criminal Background Check System before selling a firearm to an individual. This helps prevent firearms from being sold to individuals who are prohibited by law from owning or possessing firearms, such as convicted felons or those with certain mental health conditions. Federal law mandates that firearm manufacturers and dealers maintain detailed records of firearms transactions. This includes information such as the identity of the buyer, the make and model of the firearm, and the date of the transaction. These records must be kept on file and made available for inspection by ATF agents. In addition to federal laws, individual states and local jurisdictions may have their own regulations governing the manufacture and distribution of firearms. These laws can vary widely and may include additional requirements, such as waiting periods, restrictions on mag capacity, or background check enhancements. KCI is going to be held against all these standards to make sure they truly could not have prevented the Ohio shooting from going down, and will have to prove there was no negligence on their part. Biden on gun violence. This is not the only case that has the potential to change gun laws as well as the Second Amendment, considering the fact that the Biden administration is more focused than any other on gun control. Biden's rhetoric has grown ever stronger about guns. He routinely calls for banning attack weapons, in pushing a gun control platform even tougher than during the Obama administration when he was vice president. He has been emboldened by the midterm elections, when his regular talk of gun control didn't result in massive Democratic losses, and he's expected to continue to argue for strong changes as he moves toward a 2024 re-election run, his aides say. The grief was still suffocating, the anger still visceral, President Joe Biden said, in a suburban Los Angeles community where a gunman stormed a dance hall and slain 11 in January 2023. He announced fresh federal measures to curb gun violence, but emotionally declared there must be more. The president told the crowd he'd signed an executive order aimed at stiffening background checks to buy guns, promoting more secure firearm storage, and ensuring law enforcement agencies get more out of a bipartisan gun control law enacted last summer. Biden, whose own familiarity with grief is well known, his small daughter and wife were slain in a car crash in the 1970s, and later his adult son died of cancer, touched on the everyday things he said hurt so much after the initial shock is gone. The way a closet still smells like a loved one, the sound of a laugh, the bend of a smile. The victims in Monterey Park, where 20 were shot after Lunar New Year celebrations, were older Asian Americans, mostly in their 60s and 70s. Biden said they represented a powerful vision of America. Our diversity is the strength of this nation. His order that day directed the cabinet to complete a plan to better structure the government to support communities suffering from gun violence. If the Federal Emergency Management Agency can respond to natural disasters to provide on-the-ground support, the government should be able to do the same for a shooting, he said. More mental health support for grief and trauma, financial aid for victims and for businesses forced to close during a lengthy police investigations. He is directing Attorney General Merrick Garland to shore up rules for federally licensed gun dealers so they know they are required to do background checks as part of their licenses. He is also mandating better reporting of ballistics data from federal law enforcement for a clearinghouse that allows federal, state, and local law enforcement to match shell casings to guns. But local and state law enforcement agencies are not required to report ballistics data, and many do not, making the clearinghouse less effective. Biden administration gun reform. The Biden administration has taken a number of steps to reform gun control in the U.S., perhaps more than any other. One such step is signing the bipartisan Safer Communities Act into law. The act is the most significant gun violence reduction legislation enacted in nearly 30 years. The law includes provisions to expand background checks, provide funding for mental health and school safety programs, and crack down on straw purchases. President Biden has also issued a number of executive orders to reform gun control. These orders include measures to crack down on ghost guns, increase the use of red flag laws, and improve the reporting of gun violence data. The administration has also provided funding to states and localities to implement gun violence prevention programs, launched a public awareness campaign to educate Americans about gun violence, and worked with law enforcement to crack down on gun trafficking and straw purchases. Biden has continued to advocate for further gun control legislation. He has called on Congress to ban these attack weapons and high-capacity mags, require background checks for all gun sales, and close the boyfriend loophole. The Biden administration's efforts to reform gun control have been met with mixed reactions. Gun control advocates have praised the administration's efforts, arguing that they are necessary to reduce gun violence. Gun rights advocates have criticized the administration's efforts, arguing that they violate the Second Amendment. Only time will tell what the long-term impact of the Biden administration's gun control reforms will be. However, the administration's efforts have raised awareness of the issue of gun violence and have put pressure on Congress to take action. The Biden administration's efforts to address gun violence are ongoing, and the administration has made it clear that it is committed to reducing gun violence and making the U.S. a safer place. However, they do face some significant challenges. For example, gun rights advocates are a powerful lobby group that has been successful in blocking many gun control measures in the past. Plus, The Supreme Court has ruled in a number of cases that have made it more difficult to pass gun control laws. Not to mention the political climate in the U.S. is very polarized, and gun control is a highly contentious issue. This makes it difficult to pass gun control legislation even when there is broad public support for it. But despite these challenges, the Biden administration has made significant progress in reforming gun control. Challenges to Biden's gun reform. Opposition to Biden's gun reform agenda has emerged from various quarters, primarily centered around concerns regarding the Second Amendment, the effectiveness of gun control measures, and potential government overreach.
Blatantly denying the power grab being carried out by the executive branch yet again.
As a kid, I came out of a different movement, the Civil Rights Movement.
Pretty clear about the extent to which this is an abuse of the Administrative Procedures Act.
How many guns has the ATF lost?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
The extent to which this is an unconstitutional violation of our Second Amendment rights.
Is it a difficult question to understand?
Critics argue that the proposed reforms infringe upon the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens, asserting that the right to bear arms should not be restricted by government action. They question the efficacy of stricter gun control measures, pointing out that criminals will always find ways to obtain firearms illegally, while law-abiding citizens may face additional burdens and restrictions. Another significant point of contention revolves around the interpretation of the Second Amendment. Opponents of Biden's gun reform agenda argue that the amendment guarantees an individual's right to possess firearms for self-defense and other lawful purposes. They view the proposed measures as contradicting this interpretation and limiting personal freedoms.
But what is also true is that it is incumbent upon the United States Congress, the House of Representatives in particular.
It takes extraordinary courage for them to stand up here and retell the story.
Most apparent here a defense of the Second Amendment, which this most certainly is.
I don't know if you're referring to any particular incident or
to do anything about what the president is doing to exercise that authority unconstitutionally, as was the case with student loans.
As many of you out there, either parents, relatives, and/or victims yourself.
Mental health emerges as a focal point for some critics who believe that addressing underlying mental health issues would have a more significant impact on reducing gun violence than implementing stricter gun laws. They argue that the focus should be on improving mental health services and identifying potential threats, rather than imposing further restrictions on gun ownership. Opponents also raise concerns about potential government overreach and the incremental erosion of gun rights. They fear that stricter gun control measures could lead to further limitations in the future, encroaching upon individual liberties. This concern about expanding government authority extends to worries about the potential infringement on other constitutional rights.
no guns were lost. They were stolen by an individual who's now in prison.
In areas that are poor, mostly minority, there's a mass shooting.
AK-47 is an automatic Kalashnikov model of 1947.
Some months later, during an ATF audit, I was told the background check was now a non-approval.
Thought it just like, wow, it doesn't fit the definition, it doesn't fit the rulings, but we better run this up the chain.
Resistance to Biden's gun reform agenda is amplified by the opposition from gun owners and advocacy groups such as the National Rifle Association. These groups actively lobby against stricter regulations and mobilize their members to voice their concerns. Their influence and advocacy efforts contribute to the political challenges faced by the administration in implementing comprehensive gun control reforms. Additionally, the partisan divide and political ideology play a significant role in the opposition to Biden's gun reform agenda. Conservative ideologies, which emphasize limited government intervention and individual liberties, often align with opposition to stricter gun control measures. Partisan differences and polarization contribute to the opposition from lawmakers and political groups, making it challenging to pass comprehensive gun reform legislation.
I completed their background check using Florida's FDLE firearm purchasing program.
Put your finger over this and then push forward here. It basically will put your finger on that trigger.
The legal landscape also presents a hurdle for gun control reforms. Supreme Court rulings have clarified and protected Second Amendment rights, making it more difficult to pass certain types of gun control laws. This adds another layer of opposition and challenges for the Biden administration in its pursuit of gun reform. Despite these oppositions and challenges, the Biden administration remains committed to implementing gun control reforms and addressing gun violence. Their efforts aim to strike a balance between reducing gun violence and respecting constitutional rights while navigating the complex and contentious landscape of gun control in the U.S.
Connecticut delegation, which is incredible. I think on this issue and many others, you're the best delegation in the United States.
And of course, we've got a lot of criticism over this. So why is it not a machine gun?
She proves you can run for office ending gun violence in the South and you can win.
Congress wants to change the law and come up with a new interpretation, then ATF will follow that new interpretation.
You can prevent the next tragedy. You can save life. You can save families in the process.
Gun control and crime statistics. The tragic shooting in Dayton, Ohio served as a catalyst for a national discussion on gun control laws and the necessity of implementing stronger measures to combat gun violence. Supporters of stricter regulations emphasize the incident as proof of the immediate need to address loopholes in existing laws and to establish comprehensive background checks for gun purchases. The use of a high-capacity rifle in the shooting further intensified concerns regarding the accessibility and deadliness of such firearms. Additionally, the incident shed light on the significance of mental health resources and early intervention in identifying and managing potential signs of violence.
When somebody bump fires, think of this as a bump fire stock and able to move.
We are not finished. We are not finished. We are not finished.
So what happens is, I pull the gun into my trigger finger.
Details of the law, but folks, listen at home. Here's a quick summary of what this law is doing. It's already allowing.
Holding it a certain way, it'll continue to bump back and forth against my trigger finger.
To run enhanced background checks on young people under 21 trying to buy a firearm.
Advocates of gun control argue that by enacting stricter regulations and enhancing access to mental health support, future incidents similar to the Dayton shooting can be prevented. They believe that comprehensive background checks will help identify individuals with criminal records, history of violence, or severe mental health issues, thereby preventing them from obtaining firearms legally. Restrictions on high-capacity rifles and other dangerous weapons can potentially reduce the magnitude of mass shootings and lower the overall lethality of gun violence. Furthermore, proponents of gun control stress the importance of mental health support and early intervention programs.
Do any of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle give a whit about separation of power?
Who was not an ATF employee.
But there were recommendations made on what you should do so that you don't become the victim of the theft.
Because they like the outcome of the policy. The banning of a piece of plastic.
Thousands of firearms parts, and ammunition had been stolen from the ATF. So
that's the truth, but it's not really about the pistol braces, is it?
You gave testimony that the brave ATF agents are the ones showing up at 2 a.m. after a burglary.
Inventing the pistol stabilizing brace to help his friend, a disabled combat veteran, at the shooting range.
But it seems as though in this case, you were the one burglarized. Why have you not followed the recommendations?
By improving access to mental health resources and addressing the underlying issues that may contribute to violent behavior, it is believed that potential perpetrators can be identified and helped before they resort to violence. This approach emphasizes the need for a comprehensive and multifaceted strategy that combines gun control measures with efforts to address mental health concerns and promote overall societal well-being. Overall, the tragic shooting in Dayton, Ohio sparked a nationwide conversation on gun control laws. Supporters of stricter regulations emphasize the importance of comprehensive background checks and restrictions on high-capacity firearms to prevent similar incidents. They also advocate for improved access to mental health resources and early intervention programs to address underlying issues that may contribute to violence. By implementing these measures, it is believed that society can make significant strides in reducing gun violence and ensuring public safety.
Another tragedy in a school, a grocery store, a parade, or a place in America. Honestly, I feel like that as well.
Advise Mr. Bosco that his stabilizing brace did not convert a pistol into a short-barreled rifle.
There's far too much gun violence, but that's why the summit is so important.
I prefer to go ahead and use the unaccountable, unelected bureaucrat at the ATF to make policy.
We did overcome an unrelenting opposition of the gun lobby to gun manufacturers and so many politicians who hide behind the belief.
And ATF has implemented numerous different safety measures with respect to the national destructive brand.
Well, I mean, it's a bad idea for the Republic. It is a bad idea for freedom. It is a bad idea with respect to our fundamental rights.
That shows an ATF that is not functioning correctly and is not responding to the problems you create.
Implications for firearms industry. The Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, or the PLCAA, is a significant piece of legislation in the U.S. that provides immunity and legal protection to firearm manufacturers, distributors, dealers, and trade associations from civil lawsuits related to the misuse of firearms by individuals. The PLCAA shields the firearms industry from being held liable for damages resulting from the criminal or unlawful misuse of their products.
Even though FDLE made the error, it was on my paperwork, so ATF deemed it a willful error.
Come out today and say the slide fire stock or the binary trigger by name is made illegal.
And the Second Amendment says it shall not be infringed, and the word infringe means by banning parts on firearms.
This legislation has already provided more than $230 million.
Something that doesn't fit into these 10-point criteria that Congress just put out.
Close to 50,000 background checks over 46 years. Why would I willfully ignore this background check?
Court has the right to temporarily remove a firearm where there's danger to themselves or others.
It ensures that manufacturers and sellers can operate without constant threats of bankruptcy or legal battles. The PLCAA's implications are significant as it fosters stability and certainty within the firearms industry, promotes consistency in legal treatment across states, and upholds the principles of the Second Amendment. Future outlook for gun reform efforts. The case against Kyung Chang Industry Company Limited and KCI USA has catapulted the gun regulation debate into the spotlight, injecting a dose of intrigue into the potential outcomes that lie ahead. Picture this: a courtroom drama unfolds as the plaintiffs seek to hold the firearm manufacturers responsible for the high-capacity mags that were tragically used in the Dayton shooting. The stakes are high and the implications are far-reaching.
Decision that was made the right way.
We made a technical and statutory decision that was correct.
I know what they're doing. I know what they're doing.
They're
getting robbed on one hand, so you can't keep a hold of the guns you're supposed to have.
My colleagues on the other side of the aisle know full well what they want to do, and that it's not just banned an accessory.
I want to say that it is brave women men and women of ATF who do this.
They want to ban firearms. They want to ban firearms from top to bottom.
Firearms data. ATF did not always comply with the Appropriations Act restriction and should better adhere to its policies.
Because I've always been taught, if your opponents say something, you should believe them. And that is the reality.
In one corner, we have the passionate gun rights activists fiercely opposing any notion of holding weapon producers accountable for the actions of individuals. They argue that such a move would set a dangerous precedent, like a legal domino effect, and divert attention from addressing the root causes of gun violence.
As a result of breaking the law, didn't you guys have to go and delete like 250,000 records that you illegally kept?
The conventional wisdom was we would never get any Republicans to support gun legislation, period.
Might end up being a message amendment because the President of the United States will almost assuredly veto it.
Which many have described as the most significant gun safety law in 30 years, and it is.
Because he doesn't care about separation of powers either.
But for me, and for most of you, here's what it really is. It's an important first step.
Their rallying cry emphasizes the need to focus on mental health concerns, social factors, and the proper enforcement of existing laws. It's a battle fought on multiple fronts to safeguard what they see as essential liberties. On the opposing side, a wave of supporters calling for stricter gun control rules sees these lawsuits as a golden opportunity. They view the courtroom as a stage for change, where they can advocate for more stringent restrictions and demand responsible manufacturing practices that prioritize public safety. Each twist and turn in the litigation serves as a catalyst for their cause, igniting hope for a future where firearms are regulated more effectively. Amidst this clash of ideals, the future of gun reform efforts remains shrouded in uncertainty. The discussion surrounding the Second Amendment rights public safety concerns and the role of the firearms industry seem destined for continued debate and contention. Only time will tell whether these legal battles will spark significant changes in gun laws or serve as a tipping point for manufacturers to adopt safer practices. That's all for today, folks. See you next time.